Hi, I'm Kara, mom of three, pediatric sleep expert, certified parenting coach, and founder of Well Rested Mama. Welcome to the Unswaddled podcast. Tune in every other week as we chat about baby and toddler sleep solutions, overcoming parenting challenges, and all things messy motherhood. Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Well Rested Mama Unswaddled. This episode, we are diving into the crib to big bed transition, which is a very popular topic in the baby sleep space. I personally feel that this transition happens way too soon. And I also feel that that's an unpopular opinion. There's a lot of people that, will swear my 18-month-old was ready, right? They hated their crib or whatever the reason may be. The reason wasn't specific to baby sleep and being ready, right? Cognitively ready, age-wise, are they ready to handle that transition? Or is it because you want to make that transition to make something else easier for you? Which I totally understand how it's easy to get caught up in that and those decision makings. I can't even tell you how many times I have a client that will move their little one from the crib to the bed because they're expecting, right? And they need the crib, or because their little one won't sleep in the crib. So they think that if I get a brand new bed and a brand new room, they're going to love it and they are going to sleep all night long in their big bed. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. And that's not really how it works. So our goal is to help you identify when to make that transition and how to do it, right? So first, I want to start off with how to know if you made the transition too soon. The biggest signs that you made the transition too soon are going to be that you are all of a sudden stuck laying with them until they fall asleep, okay? They will not stay in the bed. They know that they're supposed to stay in the bed, and when you say, here's your bed, you're supposed to stay in it, yes, they understand what you're saying, but they're not retaining the information for long periods of time. And what I mean by that is you're putting them down, you're tucking them in, they're staying in their bed, but then after a little bit of time, you're noticing that they're coming out of the room, or they're starting to experience that freedom that they never had before and they don't know what to do with. Another sign would be they are coming to your room, okay? They're waking up, they are exiting the room completely, going to your room and getting into your bed, okay? That is another example of them understanding that that's their bed and that they're supposed to sleep in there, but when they wake up, they're kind of forgetting that part and they're going to find you. A lot of that can stem from you being there at that initial bedtime where you're trying to get them to stay in their bed and then they're waking up and you're gone. So that's a completely normal response, right? They're waking up, you're not there anymore. So their goal is to find you, which is normal. Like that is something that we would expect them to do because in their brain, you disappeared and you're no longer there. So if all of those things are happening, chances are they were not ready for that transition. And this is kind of like twofold because you could have had, let's say they were in the crib and you have an independent sleeper and that transition happened and now all of a sudden it's not working anymore, right? That's one side of the spectrum. The other side is they were not an independent sleeper and your goal is to get them to be an independent sleeper by this new exciting bed that they're going to love so much and stay in all night long. So both of those scenarios are coming together and you're ending up in the same spot. They're not staying in their bed, they're exiting their room and they're coming to you. So that's where we start to identify they're not handling this. This is not working. So if you are in a situation where you made the transition too soon and you had an independent sleeper, you have the opportunity to go back to what was working, right? If this is what you're doing and it's not working, but you did not have an independent sleeper, now you're in a position to say, like, what do we do now, right? They weren't an independent sleeper in the crib. They're not an independent sleeper in the big bed. What do we do? For those of you that don't have the option to go back to what was working, you need to figure out what are the next steps. So your number one step is figuring out how am I going to make them an independent sleeper? But also, are they ready to become an independent sleeper in this new environment? Or is it going to be easier to teach them how to be an independent sleeper in a different environment, which means they are not ready for the big bed, but they still can be in that crib. But let's learn how to be an independent sleeper in that crib before we make that transition too soon. So in order for us to figure out, are they ready for that transition? Are they ready for the big bed in general? You want to ask yourself a couple things. Number one, how old are they? I would say most kids are not ready for this transition until 3.5, 4 years old. Caleb was definitely past 4 years old. The top signs for him was he loves sleeping, right? I can hands down tell you that he is the best sleeper out of all three of my kids. And he was in the crib for the longest out of all of them, but I knew he was ready because he was sleeping in his crib. The crib didn't bother him. It didn't affect his sleep. He would climb out safely. He would climb in safely. He truly went to bed and he didn't care what he was sleeping in, right? The reason I chose to make that transition for him was because he would need to go to the bathroom. And if he's climbing out of his crib to go to the bathroom, it's obviously time for him to be able to get out of the bed and go to the bathroom. So he was ready. It didn't matter what he was sleeping in. He would sleep in anything that you gave him. I knew that he was a strong enough sleeper. He wasn't going to, start not sleeping for some reason because I changed what he was sleeping in. Some other signs that you want to look out for are they're asking for a bed, okay? They're old enough to ask you for a big bed, right? So that is like where the maturity comes in. Cognitively, they know what they want. They're asking for it. And you know that they're a good sleeper. They're going to remain a good sleeper as long as you continue to offer that structure for them. Now, one thing I do want to touch on is when your little one is in a crib, right? And let's say they're not climbing out, they are in a confined space, right? They are in there, they're safe, you know where they are. Once they're no longer in that crib, they have freedom, right, to roam the room. And I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, you'll make this transition. They're ready, right? You're making the transition. It's all going perfect. After about 3 weeks, at some point, they get up and they think like, let me try to open the door, okay? Now, all of a sudden, that door opens and they exit the room. You have now entered an entire new level, like you've unlocked, right? Level 4. They know they can get out of bed, which they knew before, but they didn't because it like never came up. But now they're getting out of bed and they're exiting that room. So now you are kind of entering that unsafe zone of, are you sleeping? Is your little one roaming the house in the middle of the night? That is where I personally will treat the entire room as a crib. Okay. So like, let's go back. When they were in a crib, they couldn't get out, right? So now that they have a big crib, they can't get out. So I use the safety handle on the door to keep them in their room, and they have the freedom to roam the room just like they had the freedom to roam the crib, but I'm preventing them from having any unsafe situations to where they are exiting that room and I don't know that they've done that. I say this just like as a mom in general, and I will tell you, Blakely, she was a little bit on the younger side when she transitioned to the big bed. She actually had a big bed in her room and a crib because I used it kind of like as a guest room just in case. And one night, like I will never forget, I was upstairs and it wasn't super late, but like late enough, like let's say between 10 and 11, I heard her crying, but then before I had time to like get up, I heard the crying just like cut off and like it stopped. And in my like experience, like that's not something she normally did. She didn't cry in the night. Like it wasn't like I was going to start implementing sleep training or anything. Like I knew like that was weird. Like I'm obviously coming downstairs and she wasn't in her room. And she had gone through the garage door and out by the pool because she was looking for us. That was just enough for me to like that was just enough, right? Like I knew she was too little to be outside of the crib. I wasn't going to put her back in the crib, but I knew that I could keep her safe in her room with the safety handle on so that obviously I could enter the room at any time, but she could not exit the room. Okay. And that just gave me peace of mind knowing that that was never going to happen again. And I would never want that to happen to, of course, anybody else. And obviously, like, we get to an age where they are going to need to exit their room. So I personally always kept the safety handles on until we were doing potty training and until I was going to have them exiting the room frequently. But at that point, they understood where they were going and what they were doing, right? They were never at any point coming to look for us, like in a situation where, you know, she was just so little at that point, right? She didn't know what she was doing. But the potty training part, they have to exit the room, right? I personally teach my kids to tell me through the monitor that they're going to go to the bathroom, and then I meet them down there just because a lot of times until a certain age, they need your assistance anyway. So that's just something that worked for us, okay? It was, you know, never a situation where they couldn't open the door and they were left there. If they were at the door, they needed something, I tried to get there as quickly as possible to open it so that they knew that they weren't quote unquote locked in their room. Because I never wanted them to feel that they were locked in their room. I just wanted them to be comfortable in their space, but also keep them safe. If you have a little one and they are, let's say they're climbing out, okay, and your gut kind of tells you like, they're ready, like, let's just do it, but they're not ready, right? So we want to really, really make sure. And in order to do that, there's a couple things that you can do to kind of see if it can buy you a little bit more time. So one of those things is a sleep sack, okay? If your little one's climbing out and they're not wearing a sleep sack, that sleep sack is going to help avoid them being able to lift their leg. It's going to decrease that leverage that they have, and it could keep them in there a little bit longer. Another thing that we will do is lower the mattress to the floor. This one's a little bit tricky. You have to make sure that the mattress is thicker than the space between the horizontal bar and the floor, because the mattress will be thicker than that, and then you're dropping it down to the floor within the mattress frame, and that is increasing the height, right? So that they are not able to lift that leg as well. I've had people ask, their kids are taking off their sleep sacks. You can put the sleep sack on backwards. That way the zipper's in the back and it's not affecting, you know what I mean? Like, they're not taking it off, because a lot of times they'll take it off so that they can lift their leg. If they can't take it off, it makes it a little bit harder for them to do that. If they are successfully lifting their leg, you can watch them on that monitor and intervene the second that they do that to kind of distract them from that process. And after a couple check-ins, they're going to realize that that's no longer an option. And then ideally that will kind of keep them from doing that as well. Now, you've tried all the things, you've done all that, and you have no choice. This is where we want to make sure that you're making this transition correctly. Okay. You've identified all the signs, they're ready, they can do this. There's a couple things that we want you to do in order to ensure you're successful. Because again, like I said, a lot of times the success is there for about a week or two, and then all of a sudden it's completely gone and you're stuck in a situation where you no longer have an independent sleeper. So a couple things that we want you to do is, first, before you make the transition, implement the safety handle, okay? They don't know that it's there. They can't get out of the crib anyway. They're not trying to exit the room, but when they try for the first time and it doesn't work, they don't know any different. That is normal. Then they're just going to start to roam the room, right? Which is exactly what we want them to do. We want them to explore. We want them to know that they're safe and in their room, but then that'll increase the chances that they're just going to get back in their bed because they've explored, they've seen it all, nothing exciting, and they're getting back in their bed. With that being said, they are going to roam the room. So it's important that you remove anything that could cause injuries. We want your furniture mounted to the wall, anything that's hanging that they can pull down. No like crazy amount of toys. You can have stuff in there that's not stimulating, books, stuffed animals, that kind of stuff. You don't want anything, you know, that's going to play a lot of music or lights or entertain them and give them a reason not to go back to their bed. We want you to implement the green light. So I personally do that, I would say around 2 years old. Let's like before the transition, the green light will be in their room and it'll turn green every morning at 7 because that's the time that I'm getting them up. So by the time they're no longer sleeping in a crib, they know that when that light turns green, they're going to get up, right? So then they're waking up before 7, they're roaming their room, they notice the light turns green, and all of a sudden they know they're allowed to exit. You go over, open the door, and it starts that routine, and it helps them really understand it's not time to get up on those mornings that they do wake up too early. Before you are making this transition, talk to them about it. You want them to be involved in the process. You can let them pick out their bedding, right? You can let them help you take apart the crib if you're going the route of just taking off the side. Implement a sticker chart, right? Like every night you sleep in your new bed, you get a sticker. At the end of 5 days, you get a cookie. Like whatever it may be, give them a buy-in. Help them understand that they want to do this, that they can do this, and it's not that big of a transition. All that they're doing is, right, taking off a side rail. They're still sleeping. They're still amazing independent sleepers, but it's a change. So there might be a little bit of a learning curve. But again, if you implement all those things, the worst case scenario is that they're going to roam their room for a little bit and then they're going to go to bed, which is exactly what you want them to do. And then you should never have any issues moving forward. For those of you that are already in the transition, you've already done it and it's not working, you can implement sleep training in this new sleep environment. And to be honest, it's actually not as daunting of a task as it may seem. We want to remove the fact that they think that you need to lay with them to fall asleep. We want to remove their ability to exit the room, right? We want to kind of give them a sense of freedom inside their sleep space, because remember, we're treating the entire room as a crib, right? So we are giving them a little bit of freedom, but we don't want to give them too much freedom that they truly cannot handle. And that is what happens most of the time. They have too much freedom. They don't know what to do with it. And they're almost craving that structure back that they had with the crib. So we essentially are sleep training in the same way that we would if they were in a crib. But instead of walking to the crib to implement the sleep training, you are entering the room and guiding them back to their bed. When we are treating the room as a crib, the sleep training is going to look very similar, right? So sleep training with a crib, you are entering the room and you're going over to that crib. Whereas when you're implementing sleep training and the room is the crib, you're opening the door and they are going to be right there staring at you. Okay. So this is where it's a little different. You're walking them back to their bed. You're implementing those check-ins. But the biggest thing that you're doing is we're teaching them that no matter what, if they need you, you are entering that room. There is never going to be a time where they need you or they feel like they need you and you are not doing that, right? Like you're not putting them in a room and never coming back. And that's what we need to help them understand. We need them to know that no matter what, you're showing up, you're coming in, you're checking on them, you're doing X, Y, and Z, but you are not laying there. You're not helping them fall asleep. You're not taking them to your bed. And the biggest thing is that you are always the one going to them and they are never the one coming to you, right? So you're removing that freedom of them exiting that room and you're creating a boundary. And that boundary is showing them that no matter what, you're there, but you're in control of those interactions because you know when they need you versus when they don't, right? And what I mean by that is they're okay, right? Maybe they're mad that you're not in there laying with them, but there's no sense of their brain that says, you left me, I am by myself, and no one's coming to me. Like that should never be crossing their mind. And the way to do that is to really ensure that you're present, you're implementing the sleep training correctly, and you're teaching them that you are still there no matter what. As you're implementing all of this, the number one thing you have to keep in mind is they are doing what you want them to do every single night. No matter how it looks, they're in their room all night long, sleeping in their bed, okay? Because you've set those boundaries. They can't exit the room, right? So on paper, they stayed in their room all night long. No matter how many times you went into that room, they stayed in there. So they get a reward for following through with that, right? It was implemented. They don't know that. But the more positive reinforcement you do every single morning, the more they're going to buy into the process, the more they're going to want to do it. When I was doing this with Blakely, it was a little different because I was taking away her pacifier, but I had to do sleep training in order to do that. I would literally FaceTime my mom, FaceTime anybody that would answer and say, guess what? Blakely slept in her room all night long last night. I remember being in Publix and seeing a random older lady that I never met in my whole life, and we told her about that, right? And Blakely was so happy and so excited to be able to like share her success with anybody that pretended they would care. And she like started to own the process, and she wanted to do it. And then every day that passed, it got easier and easier because we were focusing on the positive. There was never a time that I was like, you did amazing, you stayed in your room all night long, but I had to come in there 8 times. Could you do a little bit less next time? Like, none of that. We did not focus on anything other than her doing what she was supposed to be doing and her getting that reward every single morning. And it just trickled through the entire process, and she was so proud of herself. If you want to look into what that process looked like, I have it saved on Instagram under the highlights, and it is labeled Dropping the Passy. So I kind of went through the process. There's a lot of screen recordings of the monitors, of the check-ins, and how we kind of interacted with her. You'll see her shopping at Target for her prizes. So take a look at that. If this is something that you've given it your all, it's not working, please contact us. We can help you. We can literally lay it all out, tell you exactly what to do, and also help you and communicate with you as you're actually implementing it. And that can go a long way for someone who is anxious about this or has tried and it's not working. There's reasons why it's not working, and we can help you figure out what those reasons are and guide you to the other side, because it's definitely difficult when kids are this age, but at the same time, they are kids and they're little and they learn so fast. They just have to be taught how. And if the consistency's not there, it's going to be so hard for them to learn. We got a couple questions on Instagram that I'm going to go through. We'll answer a few. The first one is, do I let him roam his room at night or put him back in bed? 3 years old. This is something that goes back to treating the room as a crib. That's his space. That is his room. Okay. So I want you to kind of think, if he was in his crib and like walking around, would you go in? No, right? You're just like going to let him do his thing. Same thing goes as for the room. As long as you are confident in the space you've created, there's nothing in there that can hurt him. He's fine. Leave him be. I would definitely recommend mounting a monitor just high so that you can see the entire room. You know where he is, but I would not disturb him. I would not go in there. A lot of times that can like reinforce, like his brain might say, oh, well, I was out of my bed walking around and they came in, and now you're starting to kind of like get into like a little bit of a gray area. So I would let him be. I would let him do that, and he will make the decision to go back into his bed. How do you decide they are ready if they likely won't ever climb out of the crib? Okay, so this is Carter. Carter never climbed out of the crib. How I knew he was ready is he would be on the monitor and he would literally be laying on the railing of the monitor or of the crib and just like hanging out up there until I came to get him. That's how I knew like he was never going to climb out, but like obviously he didn't like need to be in there anymore. So I would just say like age, spatial, right? Awareness, like, are they getting too big for it? That's a situation where, you might want to do it a little bit gently. Like they're not ready, obviously, like they don't want to. So maybe take the side off, right? Whatever you want to do. I personally would go straight to a big bed, but for a kiddo that like doesn't show any interest at all, you could try, gradually doing that from the steps, from the like a transitional bed to a big bed. But just talk to him about it. Ask him if he's ready. I do think at some point you just have to say like, hey, we're going to get a big bed. Like you're too big. But I also think it's okay to keep him in there as long as he fits and as long as he wants to. How to handle twins sharing a room, potentially getting too wild and not sleeping. So this actually, I did twin boys as one of my first clients. It was a friend from college, and they were getting up, right? There was a little bit of like wild play happening, but they weren't independent sleepers necessarily. So they had to implement some sleep training, and we went through that process with them. If they are independent sleepers, and obviously this this doesn't say the age, so this depends on the age too. Setting some boundaries, setting some rules. Charts go a long way. They earn, stickers down through the bedtime routine. If the issue's happening in the middle of the night, I would take a look at, like, are they napping? What time is bed? Are they getting overtired? A lot of those things can come into play. But if they're not independent sleepers, I would say implementing the sleep training is the best way. If they are independent sleepers, back to the basic, set some ground rules, and just give them some expectations to follow. Do I leave the okay to wake clock red all night, used to pitch black room before it turns green? No. So I personally do not do the red lights. I have my clients, all lights are off. I do know that the red light is technically the color that would not cause the stimulation, right? Like, it's a safe color to have on. But I also feel like if you woke up and your room is red, like, it's harder to go back to sleep. I personally do not do any lights until the green light comes on for the day. You can do the red light. I've had some people use the red light as a sign that the bedtime routine is starting, right? Like, the day's ending. But in terms of a night light all night long, I would kind of try to, like, stray away from any lights regardless of the color. All right, that is it for today. Next episode, we are going to be talking about everyone's favorite early morning wakings. We will dive into why they're happening, how to prevent them, and what to do during them. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Give this video a like if you found it helpful, or share with a friend. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and we'll see you next time.